Astonishment, lingering pain, and deep reflection are the emotions that washed over me. After researching and learning about more than 100 Black public figures connected to the dark hidden corners of betrayal in marriage. Hello everyone. We are our Memory Vault, and this is the video 21 Black celebrities who caught their wives cheating. This greatly impacts our perspective on the price of fame, the fragility of trust, and it might just leave you stunned. This video is perfect to play while you are resting, enjoying a meal with your family, or doing chores around the house. All the information in this video has been carefully researched and gathered from multiple sources. If there are any oversights, please leave a comment below to help our channel continue to grow. Please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and ring the notification bell to receive updates on our latest videos. Now let us step right into the stories of our first figures. James Brown. Opening our list today is James Brown, honored by the world as the godfather of soul. On stage, he was an absolute king, someone who could control tens of thousands of audience members with just the raise of a hand or a glide across the floor. His energy was boundless, and his power in the music industry at the time was indisputable. Yet the creator always has incredibly ironic arrangements. A man who could control a massive entertainment empire was ultimately completely powerless to preserve the wholeness of his own family home. Let us analyze the tear between the halo and the darkness of loneliness. The relentless tours and the pressures of maintaining the peak pushed James into negative habits, causing him to gradually drift away from his wife, Adrienne. But instead of finding a way to heal the silence and geographical distances, created a gap for betrayal to creep in. The fateful night at the hotel in Augusta was not just an incident, it was the complete collapse of a proud fortress. When the room door burst open, the moment James witnessed the woman he loved being intimate with a young male dancer lasted exactly 7 seconds. But those 7 seconds were enough to permanently change a human life. His throwing and shattering the champagne bottle against the wall did not carry the meaning of a normal act of venting anger. Through the lens of psychology, it was the shattering sound of self-esteem in a successful man. This incident not only took his wife away, but also took a massive fortune following a bitter divorce. But the cruelest thing did not lie in money or the satirical articles in the media. The heaviest after effect this betrayal left was that James Brown permanently lost the ability to trust people. From a brilliant icon, he withdrew into himself, sinking into doubts and the stillness of a heart that carried far too many scratches. The lesson from James Brown reminds us that no matter how high you stand at the peak of fame, the most solid foundation of life remains a home built from understanding and connection every single day. Ray Charles. In the second position is a story heavily tinged with the epic tragedy of the blind genius Ray Charles. He was the one who brought light to millions of souls through immortal soul and R&B melodies. Losing his sight from a young age did not diminish Ray's greatness. On the contrary, it made his hearing and the perceptions from his heart sharper than ever. He loved this world through sound, and also used sound to send his love to his wife Della. To Ray, family was the most sacred light, compensating for eyes that could not see the sun. However, the tragedy of deception sometimes unfolds in incredibly cruel ways. Let us reflect on the pain of a person who cannot see yet sees through everything. When Ray returned home after a long tour hoping to surprise his wife, he did not need his eyes to realize the harsh truth. The unfamiliar laugh of a man ringing out in his very own living room, the forced silence, and the delicate sounds of intertwined hands said it all. There was no screaming, no tears or loud questioning. Ray just stood there quietly like a statue, then slowly turned his back and walked out the door he had just eagerly stepped through. The silence of Ray Charles in that moment carried a profoundly immense philosophical weight. It showed the absolute pride of a man. He understood that when love and respect were gone, all words became meaningless. The divorce that took place immediately afterward in the most calm and civilized manner possible, but the wound in his heart never closed. Ray's quote to a friend: "The most painful thing is not being unable to see, but having to hear my own heart shatter in the clearest way has become a haunting human reflection. The betrayal pushed this genius into a second darkness much deeper and colder than the darkness of his eyes. Ray Charles walked away with steadfastness, proving that the light of self-respect is the only light that no deception can extinguish. The quiet darkness that Ray Charles had to bear is already an unceasing, lingering pain, but the collapse of the dignity of a musical prince right at the sanctuary of art. In the number 5 position coming up will truly be a heavy blow. Do not take your eyes off the screen, because the most shocking stories are still waiting. Miles Davis. Continuing the list in the 3rd position is Miles Davis, a great legend who reshaped the entire language of jazz music. Miles was the embodiment of sophistication, elegance, and limitless creativity. His music was like free-flowing streams, always seeking to break out of narrow frameworks. In his personal life, he once had a marriage praised by the press with Frances Taylor, a female artist who gave up the brilliant Broadway halo to retreat and become a solid rear guard for him. That sacrifice seemed like it would be the catalyst for an eternal love. But then the distance of tours and invisible pressures caused their love song to gradually lose its rhythm. Through the lens of analyzing cause and effect, negligence in nurturing affection is always the seed for fractures. Frances finding comfort with another man was a highly bitter consequence of long, lonely days. But what made the ultimate tragedy in this story was the identity of the 3rd person, a young male dancer, someone who was once supported and mentored by Miles Davis himself. The moment Miles opened the bedroom door and saw the 2 pairs of shoes placed next to each other, everything seemed to freeze. The scene appearing under the dim light was nothing less than a fatal knife stab straight into the self-esteem of a man who always took pride in his status. Miles's act of smashing the desk lamp was not a loss of control, but the tearing of a heart unable to accept the truth that the woman he loved and the student he trusted had simultaneously turned their backs on him. Miles's subsequent silence, the way he left without saying a word, was proof of a complete collapse of trust. This incident pushed the jazz legend into his darkest days, locking himself in the recording studio and seeking oblivion in toxic habits. The last bit of dignity he retained was never speaking out in resentment in the media. Miles Davis carried that pain into every breath of his trumpet, leaving a profound message. No artistic peak can compensate for the loneliness when we lose faith in those most familiar to us. Chuck Berry. In the 4th position, we reflect on the life of Chuck Berry, one of the great founders of the rock and roll era. Unlike artists with noisy private lives, Chuck often carried a calm exterior, highly focused on music and relentless tours. He and his wife, Themeta Thea, were once seen as a symbol of endurance, standing shoulder to shoulder from days of poverty until he stepped onto the peak of fame. However, behind the tranquility of a long-standing marriage hid cruel undercurrents covered up by a terrifying silence. Let us analyze the tragedy of discovering the truth through inanimate evidence. For Chuck Berry, the betrayal did not come from a loud, direct catch-in-the-act scene. It started from a quiet moment backstage when he accidentally saw his wife of many decades linking arms with a young member of the band, someone the age of his children or grandchildren, and who had revered him like an idol. Everything only truly broke open when Chuck accidentally found a small notebook in his wife's luggage. Every line meticulously recording the times and locations of secret meetings was nothing short of cold verdicts, ending all the trust he had built over a lifetime. The way Chuck Berry faced this betrayal is one of the most sorrowful stories in music history. He didn't scream, didn't smash things, and didn't even bring the notebook out to confront his wife. The fear of having to admit the truth made him choose to swallow the pain backward inward. But the price of that suppression was incredibly expensive. From that day on, Chuck fell into a state of extreme paranoia. He installed surveillance systems everywhere, locked himself in isolation on tour buses, and permanently locked the door of his heart to the outside world. The trauma of Chuck Berry teaches us a poignant lesson. Deception may not break a marriage on paper, but it will certainly kill the soul of the one left behind, turning them into a shadow, constantly living in fear, right in their own home. Marvin Gaye. Moving to the fifth position, we look back at the stormy life of Marvin Gaye, dubbed the Prince of the Motown Empire. With a smooth, deeply romantic voice and innate songwriting ability, Marvin reshaped the entire face of soul music. His marriage to Anna Gordy, the older sister of the Motown record label mogul, was once praised by the press as a perfect combination of power and art. Yet behind the glamorous shell of a prestigious family, invisible pressures and far too massive expectations silently pushed Marvin into psychological dead ends, making him turn to unhealthy habits to escape reality. Through the lens of analyzing interaction and marriage fractures rarely originate from just one side. Marvin's instability inadvertently created a massive emotional void, making his wife Anna feel tired and alone. However, the true tragedy lay in how they chose to fill that void. The incident occurred when Marvin returned to his private recording studio, a place inherently considered his inviolable artistic sanctuary. The moment the door cracked open, the scene of Anna exchanging affectionate gestures with a young male guitarist, a guy who had shown a disrespectful attitude toward Marvin in front of the crew more than once, dealt a fatal blow to the self-esteem of a man. Marvin's act of throwing a beer can at the wall was not merely annoyance, it was the shattering sound of a proud monument collapsing right in its own kingdom. He turned his back and walked away in silence, leaving a suffocating atmosphere. This pain not only took a marriage from him, but also forced him to face harsh financial obligations after the divorce. Yet for audiences who always cherish the value of art, how Marvin transformed the pain carries an immensely grand meaning. He locked himself in the recording studio, turning all the remorse, humiliation, and the hidden corners of deception into material to create the album Hear My Dear. Marvin Gaye used his very own bleeding wound to weave a masterpiece, proving that the extreme end of tragedy is sometimes the origin for the most authentic and immortal works of art. The disillusionment of Marvin Gaye transformed into a bitter masterpiece, but the tragedy of a king forced to use money to seek the truth about the wife he loved most right up next will make us reflect even more. Please continue to accompany us to uncover this haunting hidden corner. Sam Cooke. Continuing the list in the sixth position is Sam Cooke, the man honored as the King of Soul, possessing a chivalrous beauty and a voice capable of moving all classes of audiences. In the eyes of the public at the time, Sam was the symbol of ultimate success, a man seemingly immune to all the suffering of the human realm. Yet fame was never an armor that could protect against the fractures from inside the home. The relentless tours and frequent absences sowed a seed of doubt in Sam's heart. And as that doubt grew, he made a decision that changed his entire remaining life, hiring someone to find the truth. Let us analyze the fragile boundary between living in doubt and facing a harsh truth. Sometimes people would rather embrace a beautiful illusion than touch a reality full of sharp thorns. The moment Sam received the envelope from the detective containing photos of his wife Barbara walking into a hotel with his tour manager, the man he always considered a blood brother, Sam's world seemed to collapse completely. This double deception from his life partner and from his most trusted associate was a horrific psychological attack. It shattered all the beliefs about loyalty that he once revered. But what leaves people with the most lingering pain is the way Sam Cooke chose to face that pain. He didn't make a fuss, didn't complain. He chose to sit alone in the dark recording studio quietly, listening over and over to the very song Bring It On Home to Me that he had composed. That was the stillness of a heart that had gone numb, up until the day he left this world incredibly. Suddenly, Sam maintained the facade of a happy marriage before the public, deeply burying that humiliation down to the bottom of his heart. The story of Sam Cooke is a profound reminder. There are pains so great that people cannot utter a word, and the most radiant smiles on stage are sometimes traded for long, sleepless nights, gnawing at ultimate loneliness right in their own home. Barry White. In the seventh position, we tip our hats and reflect on the story of Barry White, the king of passionate love songs with a warm, velvet-like baritone voice. Barry and his wife Glodin were not just life partners, but also effective associates together, building a massive music empire. For a man who always cherished family values like Barry, the home was not just a place to return to, but also the most solid fortress protecting him from the storms of the entertainment industry. However, his tragedy carried a completely different tone. It was not just emotional betrayal, but also a blatant deprivation of trust and the fruits of his labor. Through the lens of analyzing personal space, a man's reading room or home office is always considered an inviolable boundary. When Barry returned home in the middle of the night and stepped into his private room, the scene unfolding before his eyes was not a betrayal in the bedroom, but a trampling upon all moral principles. The image of his wife Glodian wearing the shirt of his personal manager together, signing checks right on his work desk, carried an incredibly heavy insult. They didn't just steal his love, they were casually dividing up the money traded with his sweat and relentless dedication. Barry White's calmness in that moment is a testament to the character of a great man. He did not fly into a rage, but only quietly picked up the wedding photo album, hugged it to his chest, and walked away. That was the decisive departure of someone who had seen through the nature of the matter. That pain knocked Barry down for a long period, causing him to lose creative inspiration and fall into a state of debilitation. To audiences who have experienced many ups and downs in life, Barry White's story brings a priceless lesson. Trust is a person's most precious asset. When trust is exploited for profit by the very people we love the most, that wound will leave a desolate void that no halo can fill. Otis Redding. The 8th position belongs to Otis Redding, an artist possessing an explosive, incredibly powerful voice, considered the soul of Southern American soul music. Otis carried within him a sensitive heart always yearning to love and be loved completely. The song, "These Arms of Mine," that he wrote for his wife, was not just a song, but it was a sacred vow about a solid shoulder that would always shelter the woman of his life. Yet sometimes sincerity does not receive a worthy return, and those warm arms became superfluous in his very own love story. Let us analyze the peak of tragedy through the lens of silence. After a long, exhausting drive from Georgia back to Memphis, Otis accidentally stood outside the recording studio and witnessed his wife resting her head on the shoulder of a young male pianist, someone Otis had wholeheartedly supported. They did not have actions crossing the line, but the fact that they placed their hands together on the sheet music for "These Arms of Mine" with a strange commemorative inscription dealt a fatal blow to his soul. A betrayal of the soul is sometimes sharper and crueler than a physical deception. In that moment, Otis realized that his love song had been robbed of its soul, and he had become a spare part in a world he once believed was his alone. What made the greatness and also the ultimate sorrow of Otis Redding was his choice of silence. He quietly closed the studio door, leaving not a sound, deciding to deeply bury that secret down to the very depths of his heart. A few months later, an aviation incident permanently took Otis away when he had just crossed the age of 26. The fact that people found the written words I already knew. Everything inside a sealed envelope amidst the wreckage of the plane is one of the most haunting endings in music history. To audiences who always uphold nobility, Otis Redding is the image of a true gentleman. He chose to embrace the pain, to protect the honor of the one he loved, taking that secret into eternity, leaving a silence full of mourning for a great talent and a grand personality. Smokey Robinson. Moving to the 9th position, we reflect on the life of Smokey Robinson, praised as the poet of Motown Records. Smokey possessed a sweet, soaring voice and was the father of hundreds of immortal love songs that gave wings to the love of countless generations. Throughout his golden era, the image of him and his wife Claudette walking side by side was always seen as the symbol of a romantic, pure love amidst the scandals. Yet life sometimes brings the most ironic scripts. The man who could use words to paint the most beautiful love epics for humanity was ultimately powerless to write a happy ending for his own marriage. Let us analyze the cruelty of rumors and the moment of facing the truth. When whispers about a shady relationship between his wife and the drummer in the band began to spread, Smokey chose to seek the answer himself instead of questioning. The moment he quietly cracked open the dressing room door, the scene that appeared was not loud or violent, but it carried horrific, destructive power. The image of Claudette radiant in a red velvet dress enjoying a glass of champagne and giggles beside her young male colleague was like an invisible knife severing every connection between husband and wife. That intimacy and laughter completely excluded Smokey's presence, turning him into an uninvited guest right in his own world. The way Smokey Robinson reacted carried an astonishingly deep psychological depth. He did not rush in to make a jealous scene, did not hurl insults. He just quietly closed the door and drove aimlessly through the cold streets of Detroit for an entire long night. Through a philosophical lens that was the retreat of someone completely exhausted in terms of trust. The tragedy lasting for the next 4 years when they still lived under the same roof but were completely separated physically and emotionally is proof of the ultimate torment of trying to hold on to something that is already broken. Smokey's concluding sentence in his memoir, "I could write hundreds of love songs but didn't have enough courage to hold on to that woman," leaves an unceasing, lingering pain. It shows that the ultimate end of deception is not immediate separation, but the numbing of the heart, even when two people are still next to each other. Bill Withers. In the 10th position, we pause before the pain of Bill Withers, a man who rose from the very bottom of poverty. From a garbage collector, Bill rose to become a music icon, using his own talent and rustic sincerity. When marrying Denise Nicholas, an Emmy-winning actress, Bill always carried a sense of appreciation and a bit of inferiority of a man who thought he was lucky to have received far too great a gift. He worked diligently, trying to take care of everything to compensate for the gap in their backgrounds. Yet sincerity sometimes becomes a fatal weakness for others to exploit and trample upon. Through the lens of analyzing class betrayal and trust, Bill's tragedy is one of the most heartbreaking stories. When he stepped into the office of the lawyer, someone he always respected and considered a mentor who helped him escape poverty to sign property transfer papers for his son, he had to witness a double collapse. The cracked open door exposed the truth about his haughty wife flirting beside the lawyer. But what killed Bill's soul was not just the intimacy, but the pieces of evidence lying on the table. Expensive wine glasses, a ring box engraved with the word forever, and 2 luxury cruise tickets booked exactly for Bill's wedding anniversary. They didn't just deceive him, they used their very money and status to mock him. Denise's cold words, "You are not qualified to make me refuse a real man," was a direct attack on the deepest self-esteem of someone who rose from the bottom of society. Bill Withers did not fight back with violence. He put down the pen and quietly walked away. His nobility lay in the fact that he turned that resentment and humiliation into material to write the song "Use Me." For audiences who have tasted the ungratefulness of human nature, how Bill Withers faced the tragedy is a costly lesson in bravery. He proved that there are people with glamorous exteriors and high education, but their character is incredibly poor. Bill walked away from a toxic marriage to preserve the dignity of a genuine working man. Rick James. Continuing the list in the 11th position is Rick James, a star with a rebellious, wild style and the symbol of endless parties in Hollywood. In the eyes of the public, Rick always appeared as a true player, a man holding all the power to control the game. Yet behind that arrogant exterior and reckless lifestyle, Rick was a man carrying a deep emotional wound, an ultimate humiliation that he had to use a lot of money and power to cover up from the curiosity of public opinion. Let us analyze the irony of moral boundaries when they are broken. Returning to his private recording studio in the dead of night, Rick accidentally witnessed a highly chaotic scene that exceeded all imagination. His young wife, nearly 20 years his junior, whom he had showered with absolute pampering, was immersed in a revelry that retained absolutely no moral standards, along with dancers, right on the very sofa he used to compose music. Witnessing a collective betrayal right at his artistic sanctuary was a devastating blow to the pride of a man who always considered himself the master of every situation. However, the most thought-provoking point in this story does not lie in the event, but lies in the highly pragmatic resolution of the elite. Instead of letting emotions lead the way, Rick James immediately set up a defensive perimeter to protect his reputation. His calling his manager to bring bodyguards in the middle of the night, forcing the betrayers to sign non-disclosure agreements accompanied by checks worth tens of thousands of dollars, is proof that when the heart has gone numb, one is forced to use the coldest reason to salvage whatever face is left. Rick James used money to buy silence, but he could never buy back the peace in his soul. From that night on, he only referred to his wife by the title "expensive mistake." To audiences with a deep perspective, this event exposes a cruel hidden corner of fame. There are pains that the rich must pay out of pocket to hide and smile to keep living as if nothing ever happened. Curtis Mayfield. In the 12th position, we tip our hats to the life of Curtis Mayfield, who was respectfully called the conscience of American soul music. Curtis carried within him a great soul, always fighting for justice, altruism, and love for humanity through musical works of historical stature. He was a calm, profound man who always upheld core moral values. Yet even a person considered the conscience of the era could not avoid having to face moral erosion right inside his own marriage. Through the lens of analyzing endurance and altruism, the moment Curtis discovered the truth backstage at the Soul Train show carried a highly quiet tone, but was as heavy as 1,000 pounds. Seeing his wife engaging in overly intimate gestures with a young saxophone player, Curtis did not make a scene. He just gently placed his handkerchief on the table and left a sentence full of weight. "You know what you're doing." That was not a question, but a sentence of conscience striking directly at the awareness of the person opposite him. His calmness made the atmosphere more suffocating than any violent argument. It showed that disappointment had reached its peak, where words became powerless. The consequence of that night was canceled performances, massive compensation payments, but the most haunting thing was how they maintained their marriage. The fact that the husband and wife lived under the same roof but slept in 2 separate rooms for 12 long years was an incredibly harsh psychological punishment. The irony of fate was pushed to its climax when Curtis had an accident and became completely paralyzed in 1990. The wife who had once betrayed him became the only one staying by his side, caring for him until his final days. However, they absolutely never brought up the backstage event from years ago. To audiences who have gone through many ups and downs of married life, Curtis Mayfield's story is an agonizing reflection on the boundary between love, duty, and forgiveness. It proves that there are wounds that no matter how much time passes can never heal. People only learn to live with it in silence. Isaac Hayes. Moving to the 13th position, we reflect on the life of Isaac Hayes, the man hailed as the King of Memphis Soul. Isaac possessed a captivating baritone voice, a dignified demeanor, and an innate songwriting ability. He was someone who used music to connect countless lonely hearts worldwide. Yet in the glamorous picture of fame, there is a highly bitter paradox that often happens to artists. They can bring tens of thousands of lyrics and singing voices to warm humanity, but forget to warm their own bedroom. Relentless tours created a vast void in his wife Mignon's soul, and that void was filled by another man, ironically, the very guitarist Isaac always considered a blood brother. Let us analyze the cruelty of familiar sounds in an unfamiliar context. When Isaac unexpectedly returned to his hotel room in Detroit, the scene unfolding was not loud, but carried ultimate destructive power. The most haunting thing was not just the presence of his co-star in his wife's private room, but the sound coming from the cassette player. The song "Walk On" by a love song composed by Isaac himself was playing steadily. The lyrics that were once proof of love now became a background music mocking his helplessness. His wife's sharp words, "You can write hundreds of songs, but you can't give me one warm night," were like a dagger, straight to the pride of a man who was always proud of his career. The action of Isaac Hayes in that moment carried a very strong psychological symbol. He didn't rush in for a brawl, didn't hurl insults. He quietly pulled open a drawer, took out the thick touring contract, and tore it in half before walking out the door. Through a philosophical lens, tearing up the contract was the rejection of all the glories he had used to trade for family happiness. It was the collapse of a value system he once worshipped. The subsequent crisis pushed Isaac into days of deep depression, neglecting his career and cutting off contact with the world. Isaac Hayes' story leaves a lingering lesson. Success in society becomes meaningless if the price to pay is the coldness and the turning of backs of those we love the most. Teddy Pendergrass, in the 14th position, is the story full of cause and effect and tragedy of Teddy Pendergrass, one of the most alluringly masculine symbols of the soul music era. Teddy brought an intense magnetism, a wild voice capable of exploding any stage. To the public, he was the embodiment of absolute strength, confidence, and pride. Yet the creator sometimes tests people by tearing down the very things they are most proud of. And for Teddy, that collapse started from a cold, dark space, completely contrasting with the brilliant stage lights he had just stepped down from. Let us analyze the cruel distance between the peak of glory and the bottom of humiliation. When Teddy stepped out into the parking lot of the Hilton Hotel after a resoundingly successful performance night, he thought his young wife was waiting to share the joy of victory with him. But the truth revealing itself behind the door of the Cadillac was a scene so cruel it paralyzed all senses. Witnessing his woman engaging in gestures crossing the line with his very own close manager was an unforgivable double deception. The act of throwing his wife's red dress onto the cold ground and slamming the car door shut in front of the crew was an explosion of pride. In that moment, the man adored by 10,000 people became the most pitiful loser in his very own world. However, what makes people reflect the deepest about Teddy's life is the series of fateful events that occurred right after. A mere 5 weeks after that horrific night, Teddy was in a severe traffic accident that permanently stripped him of the ability to walk. Through the lens of those who believe in the connection between mind and body, it seemed the betrayal in the parking lot paralyzed his heart first, so that extreme loss of focus and panic led to permanent physical paralysis. His young wife disappeared from his life the moment he fell. The story of Teddy Pendergrass is a sigh about impermanence. Fame can be brilliant, but when trust is smashed, the entire ecosystem around a person can also collapse in the blink of an eye. Wilson Pickett. Continuing the list in the 15th position is Wilson Pickett, the man dubbed the volcano of soul music. Wilson possessed a signature raspy voice full of energy and the anger of someone who had to fight on his own to survive from impoverished slums. His music was a scream for the desire for freedom. But deep inside that edgy man, there always existed a soft little corner for love and memories of his days of poverty. Sadly, that very sacred little corner was mercilessly trampled upon by the woman he had spent his life sheltering. Let us analyze another cruel aspect of deception: the denial of the past. After a tiring overnight drive from Dallas back to Nashville, Wilson opened the door to step into his house, not to catch a passionate affair in the act. The truth appeared quietly, but was as sharp as a knife cut. On the table was a cassette tape playing the giggling laugh of some strange man. But what caught Wilson's eyes and shattered his heart were the old love letters, the letters he used to write to his wife when he was an empty-handed young man, now thrown scattered, crumpled on the floor, making way for the keepsakes of a new lover. Discarding the memories of poor days to chase after new temptations is the ultimate betrayal in terms of being soulmates. How Wilson Pickett faced that scene carried the weight of quiet despair. He did not wake his sleeping wife, did not throw things, but just silently picked up the cassette tape, stuffed it into his breast pocket, turned his back, and walked into the night. Through a philosophical lens, he brought that tape with him, not to serve as evidence for divorce, but to punish himself, to remind himself of a bitter truth that love sometimes cannot pass the test of time and a change of heart. After that night, Wilson slid into troubles borrowing alcohol to try to erase the unfamiliar laugh coming from that old tape. His departure proves a sorrowful truth. When people trample upon the love letters of the past, they simultaneously kill the kindest version of their life partner. Bobby Womack. In the 16th position, we look at a completely different angle of deception through the story of Bobby Womack, a talented artist, but one who also carried within him countless controversial hidden corners. Unlike the previous stories, where the man was the victim, Bobby's tragedy originated from his very own mistakes and downfalls. As a person always craving romantic adventures, Bobby single-handedly broke the moral standards of the family. And when the needle in the bag eventually had to stick out the way the truth was exposed to the light, left an incredibly expensive lesson about the law of cause and effect in relationships. Let us analyze the weight of silent evidence. After overcoming the scandals of the past, Bobby thought he could continue hiding fleeting romances behind his tours. Yet his wife Barbara didn't choose to make a noisy, jealous scene or engage in exhausting surveillance. She just quietly placed on the table a hotel receipt from Chicago, clear proof of the husband's 2 nights of intimacy with a young female manager. That thin receipt carried the power of an undeniable sentence. The moment Bobby tried to deny the truth with clumsy lies in the face of clear numbers on paper was the moment a man's self-respect was stripped bare and completely collapsed. The exposed deception stripped him of all rights to justify himself. The peak of the tragedy did not lie in arguments, but in the fierce psychological reaction of the wife. The feeling of consecutive betrayals pushed Barbara into a state of extreme panic, losing rational control to the point of resorting to negative behaviors, forcing friends present to intervene to prevent a bloody tragedy. Through a humane lens, this event is a stern warning bell. Promiscuity is not just a passing game. It is a fatal stab that can push a life partner's spirit to the brink of destruction. Bobby Womack had to pay the price with an expensive divorce, a stalled career, and harsh condemnation from public opinion. His story reminds us that when you betray the sacredness of marriage, you not only lose your family, but you also personally sign the sentence, losing the dignity of your own life. David Ruffin. Moving to the 17th position, we immerse ourselves in a quiet sadness named David Ruffin, as the mesmerizing lead vocalist of the legendary group The Temptations. David possessed a smooth, poignant voice that once captivated millions of hearts through the masterpiece My Girl. On stage, he was the embodiment of the most romantic and pure affections. However, behind the brilliant lights, his life was a series of persistent internal battles with the dark corners of temptation. Even so, for David, the apartment in Detroit with his wife Jenna was always the final haven, the only sanctuary to anchor his soul after the storms of an artist's life. Let us analyze the collapse of a place considered the most sacred. When David returned home in an exhausted state after a long dead-end night, what greeted him was not the familiar warmth, but a blatant intrusion. The image of an unfamiliar bathrobe draped over the doorknob was like a declaration of war tearing apart the boundary of personal space. But what made it the ultimate tragedy lay behind the bedroom door. Witnessing his wife next to the young drummer of the band, someone David had always guided and treated like a blood brother, was a devastating blow. It was not only a betrayal of love, but also a stab in the back of brotherhood. How David Ruffin reacted carried a tragic, epic beauty of disillusionment. He didn't scream, didn't hurl reproaches. His quietly dropping the liquor bottle in his hand, letting the shards scatter across the floor, was a beautifully metaphorical image for the shattering of his very own soul. He turned his back and walked away in silence, but the sound of those footsteps was heavier than any sentence. Through the lens of psychology, this betrayal took away David's final anchor, pushing him sliding down into toxic habits and leading to him being fired from the band. David Ruffin's story leaves an unceasing, lingering pain. When the only sanctuary of trust is defiled by the very people we sheltered, a person will easily lose their direction and let go of their entire great career. Eddie Kendricks. In the 18th position, we continue with another piece of The Temptations' Eddie Kendricks. If David Ruffin collapsed in his own home, Eddie's tragedy took place in a space carrying a highly special symbolic meaning, the fan club office. Eddie was an artist who incredibly cherished his audience. He personally founded and ran this club, as a way to return the love of the public. That place didn't just hold handwritten letters and gifts, but was also the place preserving the adoration and purest affection that millions of people had for him. However, the irony of destiny always knows how to find the softest weak points. Let us analyze the psychology of a highly symbolic humiliation. When Eddie unexpectedly returned to the office to personally sign thank you letters, the scene that appeared before his eyes shattered all illusions of fidelity. His wife Patricia was being intimate with the club manager right on the desk under the lifeless witness of a giant Eddie poster hanging on the wall. There's nothing crueler than being betrayed right at the place where one is most adored. Patricia's cold words, "You're just their illusion, but I need a real flesh and blood man," were nothing short of a splash of cold water thrown straight at his efforts dedicating himself to art. How Eddie faced this humiliation displayed the calmness of a sage. He didn't argue with people who had lost their character. His gently placing the fountain pen engraved with his name on the table and turning his back to walk away amidst mocking laughter was a complete letting go. That pen was not just an object, it symbolized his identity and dedication. Through a philosophical lens, Eddie chose to maintain the nobility of an angel by refusing to bicker with the mud. But that emotional wound caused him to make a shocking decision, leaving the band and withdrawing from the stage lights. Eddie Kendricks taught us that an artist's self-respect is sometimes greater than any fame, and they would rather choose loneliness in the dark than stand under a fake light of deception. Gil Scott-Heron. Continuing the list, in the 19th position is Gil Scott-Heron, who was hailed as the godfather of rap and an outstanding poet and thinker. Gil's music was not merely entertaining melodies, they were stern indictments of social issues, the voice protecting truth and justice. As an intellectual, he always sought harmony on a spiritual level. His life partner Brenda, a sharp female journalist, was once considered the perfect puzzle piece, the only one who understood his anxieties and stillness. They were a couple, bound by intellect and noble ideals. Yet, intellectual betrayal sometimes brings a destructive power far more terrifying than any physical betrayal. Let us analyze the depth of this tragedy. When Gil parked his car across the street and saw Brenda exchanging a passionate kiss with the editor-in-chief, someone who had written articles criticizing and smearing Gil's ideals in the press, many times his worldview completely collapsed. Under the windshield, a draft paper bearing words attacking him lay on top of his wife's dating text message. That was an incredibly cruel complicity. The fact that the woman he loved fell into the arms of an ideological enemy was a merciless trampling upon all the values that Gil always defended. Amidst the cold night of New York, Gil Scott-Heron did not rush across the street to make a jealous scene. He collapsed in the manner of a poet. Quietly sitting down on the sidewalk, pulling out his notebook and pen, in a state of extreme trembling, Gil wrote the first lines for the masterpiece, The Bottle. Through the lens of artistic analysis, the street that night was the most bitter desk, where he turned the despair and humiliation of a man into immortal verses. Gil understood that all arguments became meaningless in the face of a change of heart. His story brings a profound reflection. Words can move millions of hearts, can awaken an entire generation, but are completely powerless to hold back the footsteps of a woman who is determined to walk away. Johnny Taylor. In the 20th position, we look back at the life of Johnny Taylor, dubbed the Pharaoh of soul music. Johnny brought a royal demeanor, possessing billion-dollar hits and a desirable, luxurious life. The pairing of him and his gentle wife Jerian was once the symbol of a model family in Memphis. But in the shadows of the stage lights, geographical distance and prolonged tours inadvertently created a massive hole in the foundation of a marriage. The wife's loneliness became fertile ground for temptations to sprout. Through the lens of psychological analysis, a man yearning to bring a surprise to his wife after many days apart, only to receive an incredibly bitter surprise, is a highly ironic tragedy. When the apartment door cracked open in the middle of the night, the unfamiliar smell of masculine cologne and a shirt draped over a chair were like invisible knives, cutting off all hope. Witnessing Jarian sleeping soundly next to the young tour manager was an ultimate insult to the pharaoh. Jarian's cold words upon being awakened. "You think money can buy love," were a complete denial of all his efforts, making a living and dedicating himself to the family. The moment Johnny smashed the wedding photo frame onto the floor was the declaration ending an empire of love thought to be unbreakable. However, the pain did not stop there. The event of a DNA test after the divorce, showing that his youngest child did not share his bloodline, was a final finishing blow to whatever shred of reason was left. Through the lens of cause and effect, the collapse of Johnny Taylor is a stern warning. People can use money to build a magnificent palace, but cannot use it to fill the coldness in the soul of a life partner. When he neglected his family to chase the halo, he inadvertently lost the only key to protect his home from the intrusion of a third party. Luther Ingram. Closing our entire list of 21 haunting stories is Luther Ingram. Not carrying the color of rawness or violence, Luther's tragedy was covered by a terrifyingly eerie silence where the boundaries of morality and spirituality were broken in the most sophisticated way. Luther was a deeply affectionate man, always valuing traditional values. To him, marriage was not just a bond on paper, but a sacred commitment before the Supreme Being. Yet the Creator placed him in the most ironic circumstance. The person who took his happiness was none other than the minister who had officiated the blessing for him and his wife. Let us analyze the ultimate pain when faith is betrayed. When Luther returned home in the middle of the night, what he saw through the crack in the door was not physical intimacy, but a spiritual intersection. His wife and the minister were holding hands tightly on their laps, an open Bible next to it, a piece of paper with the words, "Please forgive me." The sound ringing out in the room was the very hymn that Luther had personally composed for their wedding day. Witnessing the two people he revered and loved the most, using his very faith and work to justify their change of heart, was an insult beyond the endurance of a human being. It not only killed his love, but also killed his faith. The calmness of Luther Ingram, as he quietly closed the door and left, is proof of a heart that had completely turned to stone. In just a mere 3 hours after that, he wrote the legendary song, "If Loving You Is Wrong, I Don't Want to Be Right." Through the lens of art, the song is a bitterly sour confession, a surrender of a soul that had seen through life's paradoxes. For the rest of his life, Luther never once brought up that fateful night again. His final quote, "There are things that even forgiveness cannot save," closed a sad, epic love story. The story of Luther Ingram is a profound reminder. The human heart is the most impermanent thing in the world, and sometimes the cruelest deceptions are covered up under the most dignified and sacred shells. Closing the video. We hope you have had moments of deep reflection on the price of fame and the fragile boundary of trust behind glamorous marriages. Wishing you always have a truly relaxing, peaceful, and fulfilling time full of love with your family. If you found that this video brought meaningful value, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell to continue accompanying our memory vault. Goodbye, and see you again.